In this video, I'm going to share with you different tips and strategies you can use in order to get students to participate more in class. In addition to that, I will tell you out of all these tips, which ones I use predominantly in my class. But before you get to that, let's cue that intro and get on with the video. Before you look at the different strategies, one thing you got to ask yourself is, why do you want students to participate? And that sounds like a stupid question, right? Why do you want students to participate? But it's a good question to ask, because depending upon the reason you want them to participate will determine which of these strategies will work best for you. Maybe your class is like mine, where you're in the front of the class a lot, giving different kind of lectures. And in that case, you want there to be an interaction between you and the students. Because if you just stand up there by yourself, it's a lonely spot to be in if there's no interaction. So maybe you actually just like having that conversation back and forth with the students.
I like talking to you.
Another reason is maybe for checking for understanding. Maybe you told students something or you instructed them a certain way, and you want to make sure they understand the next step of the process, or make sure they understand the information you just gave to them. So checking for understanding may be another reason why you want classroom participation.
Do you understand?
A third reason would just to have student engagement, so that way you know the students are actually involved in the class and are actually paying attention of what's going on. What you're going to find is that you're going to basically have the reason for participation will actually involve all three of these, but usually one, you'll lean more towards one or the other. So the next thing to consider is, who do you actually want to participate? Maybe you want the whole class to participate. A lot of times this is good for checking for understanding, or maybe for part of the conversation. In that case, you might use sometimes a choral response. That usually works very well for this. Or maybe another thing is you want students to volunteer their answers. And so you'll ask a question, you wait for somebody to raise their hand, and then you call upon students that raise their hand. Or a third thing might be that you just want to choose them at random. And for a lot of teachers, this is the way you want to go, because it helps you keep the students accountable to make sure that they're paying attention. So using some sort of random procedure, random way of calling upon students is a very effective thing to do in a class.
Random.
Some of the things I've done in the past in order to do this random response, random participation, will be the old trick of, remember those tongue depressors? Oh man, early in the career I used to use those tongue depressors. I saw other teachers do that. So you write the names on these tongue depressors, and then of course you just kind of pick one at random, and that is the student you'll call upon. So that might be one way to randomly choose students. Also, at one point in time, I had cards on each of the desk, playing cards on each of the desks. And then what I would do is I have another set up at the front, and I would just basically choose a card, and then whatever card I chose, and whoever sitting in that seat was the person I called upon. I've also tried using a random generator, so a random name generator. I'd have my phone. There's so many different apps these days you can choose. I would have my phone, and then on the phone, of course, you put in all the names, and then your phone will randomly choose a name, and that's who you would call upon. I've also tried rolling dice. And so what happens, I have the way I have my seats aligned. I can maybe, like, if I have six seats across and 6 deep, first dice I'd roll would be for going across. Second one I'd roll for going how far deep. And then that's the student I would choose, whoever's sitting in that seat. Another one's index cards. Put your name on the index cards. Actually had the students put their names on index cards. I keep that set up at the front, and then I would randomly choose a student that way. So after 18 years of teaching, what strategies do I personally use in my class? Well, I had to go back and answer that question. First of all, what is the purpose of participation in my class? Is it mainly for engagement? Is it mainly to have a conversation? Is it to see if they understood the material? And I realized in my class, I do a lot of lecture. And so I like to keep the flow of the conversation, the flow of the lecture going. And what I would always find to be a problem is that if I chose students at random, it kind of ruined the flow of that class lecture. And so I said, I'm not sure random is necessarily the way to go for me. And so I've done it in the past, but for my style of teaching, I don't really do too much of random calling upon kids. But that also goes along with my philosophy. And here's the thing, when I was a student, when I was younger, I was one of the students that was just really shy. I was a student that was in the back of the classroom, quiet, and just praying the teacher would not call upon me. Not because I didn't know the answer, just because I was so scared to speak in the class. And I know you don't think it now, being a teacher and all that, but I was that kid. I was so shy. I would just sit in the back of class as quiet as can be. And so for me, the worst thing that could ever happen was for me to get called upon. And with that thought process, I know there are some students like that in my classes, and I don't want them to be put in that situation where they get called upon. So I really try to shy away from choosing students at random. So with the conversation mentality, what I'm looking for is, as I'm lecturing, I'm looking for some students to raise their hand, to volunteer answers. And what that does for me, it once again kind of reinforces what I just taught for the rest of the class. And then also it shows me that some students are paying attention, but more importantly, it keeps the conversation, keeps the flow of that conversation, that class going. And so for that, and for me, that's the most important thing when it comes to student participation, is keeping that interaction between me and the students. So as an incentive to get students to participate, what I do is I offer them extra credit. And by offering my students extra credit, I usually get a decent amount of volunteering going on. I would say on average, I probably maybe have one out of every four kids that are involved in the conversation one way or the other, at least volunteering once during class. And I'm okay with that number. But part of the reason I get that response, or part of the reason for that, is because I offer extra credit. And so every time a student raises their hand, I mark them out as extra credit. It's like one extra credit point. And then I'll just keep a tally of that on my clipboard. And so, as the saying goes, people will do anything for a free t-shirt. And so with that mentality, people will do anything. So with that mentality, students seem to do almost anything for extra credit.
What is that? Free t-shirt.
So if I do come across that class or maybe that day, the students just are not participating like I really would hope they would be, I go to plan B. And what plan B is I ask the students who are participating, maybe it's like one or two of them, I ask them, do me a favor, pick somebody in the class that you would like to answer the question. I'll still give you extra credit points, but pick somebody in the class that you would like to answer the question.
So you gotta pick somebody.
The funny thing about this is they will usually pick one of their friends to answer the question. And that little interaction between these two friends, that itself sometimes actually stimulates more conversation, stimulates more interaction from the rest of the students, just because it kind of breaks the flow of the conversation a little bit, and students kind of get more involved after that. And so that's my plan B, is to actually have students pick other students if I need to do that. Now, I hope you found the information helpful. If you did, please click on one of the links up here for extra tips and tricks of the trade so you can make your teaching life easier. With that said, stay zesty.